Hey everybody, this is Zachary Jeans. Let's keep walking through the Bible. So today is day 355. We are in episode 355 and we are reading through the book of Exodus. So today we are going to look at the song that they sang when they crossed through the Red Sea, and it recounts the events in lyrical form. And no, I will not be singing. I will not be singing it. And then we're going to look at the bread from heaven. That's the manna. And we're going to look at the water from the rock. All right. And there are two accounts of the water from the rock, and they're two separate events by most people's reading, okay, based upon location and the time, and not to mention the actions. So, all right. So first say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to get in the Word every day. Thank you for spending it with me. I appreciate you hitting the like button and subscribing and all that stuff, which all the YouTube people, all the people with channels, they always ask you to do. It really does matter, okay? And for those that have been supporting and financially, you open the doors for me to do more stuff. So I appreciate you there. If you want to do that, I just want to say everything that we do here that I do is free. If you want to support and just say, hey, great job, buy me a coffee, join a monthly subscription, you can do that at ko-fi.com. So ko-fi.com, Zachary Jeans. And you can find me there. If you're looking for the link, it's in the description in YouTube. All right, before we get going, why don't we pray? Lord, I love you. God, thank you for your word. You're so good and you're so kind and you're so gracious, and yet you're so hard and real and true. And you don't bend and you don't break. Thank you for teaching us truth that doesn't bend and break. And yet, thank you for having mercy on us, because we are not that strong. Lord God, please open up your word to me. Please open up your word to these people that are taking time to get in it. And Lord, please speak to them. And I ask that in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. All right. So why don't we open up our Bibles? I'm reading out of the ESV. This is my new Bible I've been reading now. It's beautiful. I love it. But more than anything, it's functional. It's got a little bit larger point print than what I was reading out of it. It makes it a lot easier to see when I look up and I talk to the camera and I talk to you, to find my place again. So, all right. So chapter 15 of Exodus, verse 1. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, before we move on, I want to note that this song is to the Lord. When they sang to the Lord. And notice the kinds of things that they're singing to the Lord. They're not telling the Lord anything that he doesn't know. In fact, they're telling him, Lord, here are the things that you know are true. Here are the things we know are true, that you know are true. It is identifying and reveling in truth and singing that truth to the Lord. It's acknowledging, as we're going to read, all the things that who did? The Lord did. It's giving him credit, giving him the props, giving him the acknowledgement, right? So when our hearts are attuned to worship, of course there are worship songs that are self-reflective, where we're looking at our own sorrow or our own anger or our own fears, and then our own hopes and our own beliefs and our own trust as we cycle through that process on this earth of emotion. Of course, there are songs, and who is the answer in and through all that? The Lord. So much of worship is self-reflective right now in the body. But really, the kind of worship that acknowledges God's greatness, his power, his authority, his truth, that's so powerful. And you would think, hey, I would resonate more if I'm singing songs about my relationship with God rather than a communal relationship, that is the we, the church relationship with God. Or maybe you're like, I feel more in tune with God if I'm singing a song as the body. We, this and that in our relationship with God. But I'm telling you, if God's Spirit dwells within you, God literally is living within you because you put your trust in Jesus, and he comes to reside and live inside you. What makes the Spirit sing, vibrate with joy? When God the Father and God the Son are made much of. When God is exalted, when he is lifted up through your acknowledgement, then God's Spirit and your spirit are aligned inside you, and you will experience God's worship. So just take note of the kinds of songs you're listening to. And I'm not saying don't listen to songs that aren't self-reflective. I think that's a step too far that many make in worship. They're like, oh, let's get rid of all this I and me language. That's evil. Well, no, it's not. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the book of Psalms, okay? So just chill, right? If that's where you're at. If you're a Bible person, you're like, well, I don't want any me. Worship's all about me. Let's get rid of it. Okay, well, then get rid of the book of Psalms, okay? Get rid of a whole bunch of the Bible. You won't, and you shouldn't. There is a lot of me worship songs and points of view. God loves us. He cares about your needs and your emotions and all of that. But I'm telling you, if you got too much of that, then you're missing out. You're missing out. All right, so that's my preview of this song, and I'm just going to read through it. Take a deep breath, set your mind, and listen. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider he is thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host, his army, he cast into the sea, and his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power, your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries. You send out your fury. It consumes them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I'll pursue, I'll overtake, I'll divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. But you blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who's like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them. Because of the greatness of your arm, they are still as stone. Till your people, O Lord, pass by, till the people pass by by whom you have purchased. You'll bring them in and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. There's so many words in there, but you see, it's about exalting, that's lifting up. Abode, that's the place where God lives. These hosts, these armies, which God absolutely toppled in the Red Sea. And God did it for his purpose. And the people which God is bringing out of Egypt will be brought into the land which he promised, and he will judge those people for their errors, for their sins, and they were horrific. Everything from child sacrifice to all kinds of things. And God's going to bring in his children who were slaves for hundreds of years, and he's going to liberate them for the purpose of moving out and taking down many horrific peoples. And I'm not saying that any of that's easy. And I'm not saying that with our modern sensibilities that any of this seems like just or right in our eyes. But I want you to remember that the world is a messy place, and that God, that our sense is always subject to God's sense of what is right and wrong, and at different times and different eras. And for this time, he brought his people up, and he judged these armies and leaders of Pharaoh and chariots and whatnot. And he's also liberating a people that were truly slaves, slave labor for hundreds of years, longer than America has been a nation. They were enslaved as a people. And they were given freedom, and they were told to go into this land, in Philistia and Canaan and Amorites, Amalekites. You have all the tribes essentially of the land of Canaan. God is going to come in and use his people to judge, but they are going to freak out and not want to do it. All right. So, verse 19. For when the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought back the waters of the sea upon him. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground in the midst of the sea. Then Miriam the prophetess, that's the sister of Aaron and Moses, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with the tambourine and dancing, and Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea." About water and bread. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah, because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah, which means bitterness. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried to the Lord. The Lord showed him a log, or a tree, or branches, right? Showed him a log, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. The Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, "If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord, your healer. So they're at this place, this after this time where they are forced to deal with no water, they were eventually found alongside finally a bit of water right out in this wilderness, and they go to sample it, and it's bitter. Now it could be that it had too much acidity in it. It could be that it was bitter because it was, infected with, dead animals. I don't get that impression because Lord probably said it was unclean. So I'm guessing not that, but maybe there's a lot of bacteria in it. It could have been bitter because of the nearby deposits of minerals, various minerals. I get it, salt's a mineral, but you know what I mean, like other kinds of minerals. Or it could have been bitter for another reason. The point is it was undrinkable. So imagine this. You've just seen God deliver in the most amazing way. After you balked at it, you're like, no, you know what? Maybe we should just beg for mercy, go back to Pharaoh, and God wouldn't let you because he stood there in a pillar of fire and cloud and whatnot between you and the army, so that Pharaoh's army couldn't come to you and you couldn't go over to them. And all night that wind blew, and next thing you know, Moses is leading you across the Red Sea with heaps of water on your left and right, and leads you through on dry ground, and then the pillar moves out of the way and Pharaoh pursues. And you're standing on the other side of the Red Sea, and you watch the water just wash over them left and right. You've seen the power of God, and now you're led out into the wilderness from that point. After you sing praise to God for all that, going 3 days journey beyond there, and next thing you know, you're like, there's no more water. And you end up by this water, and it is like God's cried out, or rather Moses cried out, and you end up by this water, and it's better. And what's their attitude towards the Lord? When the Lord delivers you in some miraculous way through a bunch of trials and tribulations, I'm not saying it was easy, but he delivers you in some miraculous way, enough so that you acknowledge it. And you're like, God, you did that. I can't believe it. It was amazing. You're awesome. And you hit the play button on your favorite worship song, and you're like, God, you did it. And he's like, okay, let's keep going. And he leads you through a little section of life. Not long, 3 days. Whatever that is a metaphor for in your life. Short time, and you got nothing. You don't got land of milk and honey. You don't got an abundance in your life. And he's led you through this great deliverance. And then there's this period of not just victory, 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 victory. And he just gives you a tiny little time where there's not this abundant victory and conquering of this and give me that. He, in fact, gives you a period of time of fasting almost without you knowing you're fasting. In this case, it was from water. 3 days. And the people start to grumble. Well, where's God? Do you do that? Or are you keeping your eyes open? You're like, okay, it's pretty normal. Big deliverance, then gap period. Time where God wants to see what's the attitude of my spirit. Is it bitter? Well, the people's attitude was pretty bitter. They were grumbling. They were bitter. And guess what kind of water the Lord allowed them to have for a minute? Bitter water. So Moses cries out, and the Lord shows him a tree. And he tosses it in the water and makes it sweet. So it comes to the Lord, confesses their grumbling, confesses their desire, and the Lord provides a solution and is merciful and kind and gives them sweet water, even though they were bitter. with God. Moses intercedes, and God provides sweet water, good water. So what's the way to come out of your period of, the ideal way to go through that period after you see God's deliverance and you get a period of, okay, now God's going to allow your faith to be tested here. You're going to go for a few days, whatever that period is in your life, without a whole bunch of, ring the bell for another thing for the Lord. It's going to be kind of a dry period. You can get bitter. You're going to faithfully walk where the Lord leads you until he provides you water. And if God doesn't give you the water that you want, are you going to complain and pack up and go home? Go back to your sinful life? Go back to whatever it is that you came from? Are you going to seek the Lord and ask for mercy and look to see his way of delivering you? I almost wonder if had they gone through this period and not grumbled, not complained, but said, you know what, God just walked us through a freaking ocean. Whether that's a deep ocean or not, it was deep enough to drown an army. They just watched God do that. Could they have walked through the wilderness and just been like, I just watched the Lord deliver us. I don't know where we're going. I don't know how long it'll be, but I know this much. God's not going to let us starve or die of thirst out here. That is not the God that I just sing my song to. And maybe he would have granted them had they had that attitude, sweet water straight up. I kind of think that the Lord let them have bitter water to reflect their bitter attitude. Trying to wake them up. Is God giving you a little bitter water right now in your life? Trying to say, hey, wake up. Get a clue. You need to talk to me. I'll give you a branch. I'll make it sweet again. But you need to talk to me. Don't complain. Don't grumble. Don't be bitter. Come to the Lord. Talk to him. All right, so chapter 1. Oh, so here's how the Lord delivered them. I want to go on just beyond the sweet water. We'll get to this. So he tells them, if you'll diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God and whatnot, I will put none of the diseases and so forth on you like I did the Egyptians. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water, 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. And that makes me wonder too, like aside from the whole bittersweet thing that we just talked about, had they just been faithful and not grumbled, and God was testing them, see would they be diligent and listen to him and all this, would they have just moved on from those bitter waters without this whole Moses intercede for us? Would they have just moved on to the springs of Elim with the dates and all that? Gotta wonder, right? So maybe your blessing and your deliverance is right there. Maybe it is for me in ways that I don't understand for my own life. And I don't need to be bitter with the Lord. Don't need to be bitter with him. I need to diligently listen to him and obey what he's given me to do. All right, chapter 16, verse 1. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. And on the 15th day of the second month, after they had departed from the land of Egypt, and the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Grumbling. Boy, they love that grumbling. And the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Grumbling. We could have stayed back in slavery. It sucked, but man, they gave us enough meat and bread to eat. We're full. People who have experienced a harsh environment, structured environment, often go out from that environment into a freer world. And after a season of time in that freedom where things are then, they are allowed to choose and make decisions for themselves. And also they're required to make effort and provide for themselves, find themselves longing for that restrictive environment that they came from, that they used to hate, because they had a place to sleep, food to eat. It was a harsh existence, but there was a pecking order and they understood the structure. And they couldn't leave and go as they pleased, but hey, they knew the boundaries. That's how a lot of folks talk about their prison time, the negatives and the positives. This is how a lot of people talk about their time in the military. And I was in the military. I remember talking with a really great guy who's like, he was a sergeant, and we had a moment where he could kind of let down his guard. He was a drill sergeant, and he's, private. I served. I finished my. I think he did a couple tours, and he was like, I'm ready to get out. He'd been through it a couple times, and he got out. He was sure he was ready to get out. He was not an easy life doing what he was doing in the military, in the Army, and he wanted to get out. And he said he got out, and he went and tried his hand at a couple things, I think carpentry, and he's just like, I don't want to do this. He's like, yeah, I had freedom. I could, go places, take trips, do whatever I wanted. He's like, but finding, where's my next paycheck coming from? Food, this and that, clothes. What am I going to wear? All of these questions, which were answered for him in serving our country, these parts we provide our soldiers and this structure. And so this structure, which he had once thought was restrictive to his life, and it is, he realized was a blessing to him. Now, this is a positive way to look at this, but if you read what they're saying, they grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to him, what? What did they say? They said, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. They just saw themselves delivered days before, weeks before. They just saw the Lord give them water. And they're like, you know what? Live or die, it would have been better to stay back in prison in Egypt. Because at least we had 3 squares in a cot, right? 3 hots in a cot, the saying goes. Are you trying to go back? You mad at God bringing you out, liberating your life in various ways, and you're like, this hurts. Too many unknowns. I don't feel comfortable. Yeah, that other life was uncomfortable, but at least I knew X, Y, and Z were happening in my life. I want that back. I don't know. Are you? Am I? All right. Well, the Lord had an answer. It's a famous one. You probably already know the story, but let's read it. Okay. So the answer is this. Then the Lord said to Moses, verse 4, behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you. The people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. Okay, setting up for the Sabbath here. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? We're just a couple of guys. Yeah, we're God's tool, but like, why are you yelling at the pastor on the TV if X, Y, or Z isn't happening in your life? Or why are you getting mad at your group leader if you keep praying for something, but then when God shows you what to do, you won't do it? Why are you getting mad at him or her? Or getting mad at your boss, right? They're like, look, I'm doing what I can. I'm taking your comments as best I can up the chain. They ain't coming down with the answers that you want yet. Patient, be patient. Just do what you're supposed to do. Be patient. You're like, no, grumble, grumble, grumble. At evening you shall know that it was the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, it's against the Lord. When we complain against the leadership structures that are over us, especially spiritually, be careful. Careful the kind of grumbling you do. Now, we are in a theocracy. We're in a representative democracy in the United States. One might not like the word democracy because really it's a constitutional republic. Regardless of how fine point you want to define our system of laws and government in the United States, we don't have religious leaders that are directly under God, that when we complain against them, we are then offending and or complaining against God himself. So be careful how you apply this. You could stretch this to say that all leaders are appointed by God, and they are in a providential sense. But in this specific sense, we have Moses, who is as God, remember, is as God to Aaron, and Aaron is as a prophet to the people. So when they complain against Aaron, the prophet of God, who will be priest, and Moses, who is both prophet and as God's voice to the people through Aaron, they are actually giving affront to God. They are complaining to God himself. And that's the point they're making. So if you complain about leadership at work, be mindful. God's got you there. Be mindful. There's lots of proverbs about speaking wisely to those in leadership, but you aren't speaking to God's representative on earth to you. Okay, we don't have that relationship with God through a man anymore. We have a relationship through Jesus Christ, the Son of God, by the power and authority that he's given us in dwelling in us in his Spirit. We have no barriers to God. We don't have to sit down with a priest. You don't have to sit down with a church leader. You don't have to sit down with a family member. You can come to God through Jesus Christ. He is our Messiah. He is our Passover lamb. He's the one who's provided the way. But that's not what they had going on yet. God is setting up all the foundational stuff that he will then provide his Messiah into and built on. That's not what's going on here, right? So, but Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he's heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So in the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. And in the morning, dew lay on the ground of the camp. So you got a bunch of quail, or I don't know, maybe they were actually quail. I think this is where, Old Testament scholars and those who analyze language will try and figure out which bird it was, and they can narrow it down. Let's just say a pigeon-sized, quail-sized bird shows up in mass, covering the camp. Everywhere you look, you're kicking one of these birds, right? Maybe you've seen the videos on YouTube of the old-time film of when the rabbits went nuts and took over Australia. And it's just like fields of fur moving and like fast. Go look it up. The really great videos you can find showing those old films of when there were way too many rabbits in Australia. They just went nuts when they were introduced there, and just crazy. But the point is it's just the land, it's campus covered everywhere. It's just nothing but pigeon, nothing but quail, right? So when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall take each an omer, according to the number of the persons that is each of you in his tent." So everybody gets an omer. And an omer, if you look down there, is 2 quarts. It's about a half gallon of this stuff. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. And Moses said to him, "Let no one leave any of it left over till morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms, and it stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. Couple notes there. People want to make this a naturalistic thing, and they identify a kind of bug that leaves kind of a secretion on the plants in the desert in the springtime. And, you could scrape that substance up and it would be like a sweet sort of flaky paste. That's really stretching it. Perhaps a naturalist is comfortable with that. I tend to believe this is miraculous, and I'll tell you why. Because God, 1, said it was. He brought it to bear on them. 2, he made it so that if you gathered up less than an omer, a couple quarts, half gallon of the stuff, all of a sudden you'd have the right amount when you went to measure. And if you gathered too much, you're like, "Oh, I'm going to get more." Go to measure, and all of a sudden, wait, where'd it go? I've only got 1. And if you try to keep it overnight and do against what God said, this stuff, which was this amazing stuff that showed up and you could eat it, it would disappear and it would become rotten. It would change its form. It would be given unto worms. Like, it wouldn't stick around. It wouldn't save. But it's going to save miraculously when they gather on the 6th day here, and it holds over for the entire Sabbath, right? So wait a minute. If it was natural, why would it go rotten literally the next morning if you kept too much? But on a special day, it somehow lasts an extra day? How does that work? That's why I think this is miraculous. I don't think it's fair to tell God that this isn't a miracle here, that he's doing something outside the bounds of normal physics and genetics and the way and operations of the world, right? He is twisting the rules to show that he has authority over all things, to show them that they are dependent upon him, and to show them that he has ways in which he's trying to communicate with them to abide, and he just wants to see, can you follow these basic rules? Can you just follow me with a couple basic things? On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers. So that's a gallon of this stuff. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to him, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is the day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you'll bake and boil what you'll boil. All that is left over, lay aside to be kept until morning." They laid it aside until morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord." It's a day of rest. You will not find it in the field. So 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. On the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Couldn't even abide after all this stuff, and just a very big, we haven't laid out all the law, which God's going to do here in Exodus and Numbers, and it's going to describe some more law, and in Leviticus it's going to be a summation of some laws, and there's going to be lots of laws. This is some basic law. This is like doing circumcision, and hey, don't do anything on this day. Go gather some stuff on this day. Don't do it on this day. This is ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. This is literally a primer. This is like grade school. This is kindergarten for following God in the beginning here for the people of Israel. And yet that rebellious attitude is still there in them. Has God given you an ABC 1, 2, 3 thing to do? And you keep shucking him? All right, well, listen. So, some of them went out together. They didn't find any. And what would the Lord say to Moses? Well, he said, the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. He gave them the Sabbath to rest. So don't go work on it. Now, the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it like wafers made with honey. But Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of land Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar, put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept." The people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years till they came to the habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is 10th part of an ephah. Wow. They ate this stuff for 40 years. 40 years they ate it. God sustained them for 40 years. They might get some meat here, they might get some dates there, but this was the main sustenance of the people. And he gave it to them, even though these people, which he's going to get so angry with because they rebel against him further, he's going to sustain them. So, well, hey, until next time, keep walking, all right? God bless you. Bye-bye.